Hey guys, welcome to class. I know we had like a little bit of a break there, so what we're gonna take a look at this week is lesson 9. We're gonna do rotoscoping this week. We're gonna play with something called the Roto Brush tool. It's really cool. It's a really fun way of working. It's relatively easy to do too. We're gonna take a look at kind of just some of the options with it. You'll notice that we are skipping lesson 8 for now. It's just kind of like a quick little like pinning thing to like animate like illustrations, but it's essentially like the puppet warp tool, and it's honestly something that like I know that I've never used before, like in any sort of actual like production environment. It's really just more like, oh, you can do this, but it's kind of hokey looking. So we're going to skip that for right now. I would rather focus in on getting you guys into some stuff that actually kind of makes sense from like a production standpoint and actually like integrating into your projects. So what we're doing today, I can guarantee you that you will be seeing this again as a requirement on future projects. So you might want to pay close attention to this one. Again, I'll be recording everything. It'll be posted up to Blackboard and to the YouTube channel once we're done. So first things first, let's jump on a Blackboard and take a look. Only thing you're going to need is the start files for this, the assets. There's 2 of them on there. There's an extension project thing for face tracking, or like a lesson extension. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to use this boy.move file. But again, everything is inside of lesson 9. Just grab those assets, throw them on your computer. When you extract them, you're going to see these 2 files here. So what I'm going to do is fire up After Effects. There we go. And as we're working today, again, we're just gonna be working off that boy.move file, but I want to make sure I'm saving things as I go. So if you guys have any questions as they come up, don't hesitate. If you want to use the chat, if you just want to ask them out, either way works for me. But again, please make sure you're jumping out with any questions you may have. The other thing is the kinetic project, the kinetic type project. That is going to be due today. I have that ready to go. There's a folder for you. So if you click on kinetic type, there's the submission folder. Remember, all I want to hear is a .mp4 or .move inside your folder along with your start files and any support assets too. So if you've got your stuff in there, make a folder, drop your content in there, and again, make sure that you've got all your pieces together. I'm going to use this week as a submission week. Next week, what I want to do is actually review these things, take a look at how they turned out, just give everybody a chance to kind of get a sense of like how they're using After Effects. Really, it's less of a critique and more like a sharing session, so that if somebody sees like a cool technique, like I saw, I've been watching kind of as they've been getting turned in. You guys have been doing some really cool work with masking, some really interesting stuff with kind of like stacking and layering and like doing like some video masking too, not just like text masking. So there's been kind of a lot of different cool approaches to this, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to see that. So we'll do that next week as kind of part of the class, and then we'll go through from there and just kind of move forward. So without any further ado, let's take a look at this. What we're going to do is we're going to be starting with just a new basic project. I'm just going to grab this boy.move. I'm going to drag it in here, and I want to make a new composition from this footage, so I can just drag this right over here. It made that new composition. I can check my composition settings. I just want to verify that they're right. And it's a 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second. It's pulling all of the information from that composition and just building based right off of it. I don't know why I keep getting this mask shape error. I'm hoping that this doesn't keep coming up. This should be a snapping side. If this does have an issue, I may need to restart and just jump back into a different one. So what we're going to take a look at today is how we can essentially take this kid, cut him out, and in real time, we'll be able to preview all the different area that it's clipped out. But the big idea is, oh, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I was using After Effects like pretty heavily yesterday. I did this demo. I was playing around with a project for a client. Like I had a couple of things going, so it might just be a random error that I'm running into. Now, I've got this boy.move in my timeline. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look up here. I've got this Roto Brush tool and Refine Edge tool. If you guys have and you may have auto updates turned on for Creative Cloud. If you do, it actually just updated this tool like 2 days ago. So it's probably a good thing that like we're not necessarily like leaning on the book so much. We're doing more demos this way. A couple of things changed, a couple of settings. So where it used to be a lot more complicated, it's actually a little bit easier to work off of right now. But with that timeline, object selected, that boy.move, everything's fitting inside my screen. I can see the whole area. What I want to do is I want to select this Roto Brush tool. And you'll see it kind of like highlights this lower area. It's asking me, well, what do I want to Roto Brush? What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that boy.move layer to open the clip. And notice how it opens it, and it looks kind of the same, but a little different. And now I've got like this little green tool here. What it's doing is it's basically showing me this footage inside this window. Now I'm editing not the whole composition. Notice I'm just editing the layer, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our window brushes. So go to window, down to brushes, and I'm gonna take a look at my brush panel. This should probably look pretty familiar to you guys, right? Looks similar, like something you might have seen in Photoshop. So what I can do is I can actually select my sizes. If I want to make my brush bigger or smaller, I can do it that way. But what I want to do is I want to basically select an area. And After Effects is kind of smart, but what I want to do is I want to isolate this kid so that when he plays, that he's isolated from the background. So on frame 1, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag down. And I kind of auto-selected a chunk, and it did a pretty good job of picking up like the skin tones, a little bit of his hat. I'm going to go across from left to right, grab some more pieces, and you can see it's highlighting out the area that I want. So really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab down, and I'm just going to kind of grab those chunks that look like they should belong. Like here's like a little piece of this jacket up there. Grabbed a little too much, that's okay, I can clean that up later. But I'm clicking inside, and I'm just kind of using this to follow that edge. Got a little bit of his hat missing here. I think that's probably looking pretty good. I got a little piece of his hat right on the edge there. Grab that. So far, that's looking pretty good. So also notice it's saying draw these things at full resolution for best results. That's fine. Now, what I want to do is now that I have this drawn in, what I want to do is I want to switch around to a different type of brush. If I hold down, if you're on a Windows computer, it's Alt, or if you're on a Mac, it's an Option. What I'm going to do is let me zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to go to a slightly smaller brush. And notice how it goes to red or green. Maybe that's a little too small. There we go. I'm going to go to red, and I'm going to click in to just kind of erase some of that area. So what that's going to let me do is, even like in this area here, I'm just going to click once. I don't want all of this. That's actually some background. So now what I can do is as I scrub forward, wrong one, let me scrub forward here. Now what it's going to start doing is it's going to start looking at analyzing the footage. And as I scroll through it, I'm just going to jump way forward so it kind of forces this thing to render. You guys are going to notice that this process, as you're working, if you're running on a slower machine, it's going to require a little bit of patience. Here, if I just slide this forward, now it's going to kind of show me as I jump through where that edge is, one frame at a time. But you can see once we define that edge, After Effects is actually pretty good. Like here, maybe on this frame, I'm missing a chunk, so I can Option click in there. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump all the way forward here. And as I scrub forward, I want to make sure that across the entire span of this thing, that I have a nice clean edge. Now, one way to do this, and now it's doing a nice job of rendering out, you can actually use your 2 key on your keyboard as a way to skip forward. It's like a little frame skip. So I can Option click in here. And I might have to do this one frame at a time. After a couple of frames, or after it opens up a little bit, it'll start detecting edges a little bit better. I think when I get to a certain point, I'm not going to sweat it too much, especially because this is just kind of like a little demo thing, but you guys get the point that as I'm going through, everything in there kind of starts rendering out. Find his hat, just find the edges of his shirt. I'm just kind of tapping through these a little bit at a time. At a certain point, it looks like he moves his head a little bit, and it really does open up a lot more of this edge for this background in here. Maybe at this point, I can Option click in those spots. Just tap through. And this is almost like a magic brush option, like you guys have probably seen before in Photoshop. So on these, they're kind of clicking from frame to frame. I think you get the point. I'm going to skip forward. his eyes look right there. Okay, so now if I scrub back and kind of run forward, I can see where it's kicking in and it's showing me that. Now underneath here, you'll see that like I've got this toggle alpha, so I can kind of see the frame behind him. I've got the boundaries, so I can see the boundaries on or off with that transparent background. And I've also got, it's almost like a mask option. You guys have probably seen this before when you're working with masking in Photoshop, how it just kind of masks in red, and then you can kind of see that edge. You'll notice like his hat's kind of fuzzy. We got like a little bit of stuff here. We're gonna actually want to clean that up. What I want to do is, because there is a little bit of fuzz on that matte there, and I can kind of see it a little bit better now that I have that kind of scrub forward and I'm in this alpha matte mode. So now what I can do is I'm going to go back into this regular view. So I can click back on my alpha boundaries and turn them on. So if there's background's empty, or here, because it is a little fuzzy in those spots, we have a secondary tool up here. So I'm not just roto brushing and checking one frame at a time. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this refine edge tool, and I want to scrub back all the way to the beginning. So I'm on my very base frame. And what I want to do is, I think I'm going to go a little bit bigger with my brush on this. And I'm just going to click along that fuzzy edge. And I'm just going to track around. I'm doing like a little bit of a rougher cut on this. You guys could probably zoom in a little bit more when you do yours. I just want to make sure that if I have any fuzz, that it should clean that edge up a little bit. Right to about there. And it gives me kind of this weird like 3D preview. Now, once I have this done, I can kind of start seeing what this is looking like. What I want to do is, instead of having to re-render this thing every time, what we're going to do is we're going to hit this freeze button. What freezing does is it locks in those changes you have right now. So I'm going to toggle this thing so it goes into transparent background, and I'm going to hit this freeze button. What it's going to do now is it's essentially going to freeze all of my edits. So now what it's going to do is it's going to lock all that in. I can unfreeze if I want to edit back, but I'm functionally happy with how it looks. Obviously, like, you're going to take a little bit more time with this, but when I'm zooming through this and working a little bit quicker, it's kind of fast way of going. Now, once this is all frozen, and again, this is going to take a second, I'm going to knock out that background, and I want to actually change it. So what it's going to do is it's going to now officially mask this guy out. That's what this freeze is going to do. It's going to lock in this change. So this layer is going to be completely done. So when I go back into my composition, this layer of the composition will be knocked out, and I can replace the background. So if I wanted to, I could go in with different video, still background, create my own fill colors, really anything I want, and then I can kind of start knocking that out. The nice part about this is you can see it even like knocks out to black and white behind, so it's really showing me like where he lights up. So what we're going to do, now that our freeze is done, I can scrub this through. And, okay, there we go. And now that this is done, I can see as I go through, my edges look good. I kind of did a nice refine along the edge there. That's looking really, really good. I'm actually really happy with that. Now, there's some other things that we can change once we're adjusting those edges. We can also change inside of here. So here, like how much feathering is applied to this thing. If I wanted to reduce chatter, if I wanted to kind of clean up that edge a little bit, I can control all that. I did this in a lot of sequence. I want to do this first, so I'd have to unfreeze, change it, and refreeze it. Thankfully, my edges look really good, so I'm not too concerned about it. But again, as you're going through and as you're making your adjustments on here, you can make those edits on here. And notice that this is a timeline action. So if I wanted this thing to start or finish at a different point, I could turn feathering up and blend it. So I could actually animate these as almost like effects. I'm not really going to have to worry about that because right now I'm just going to do an overall change. So I'm just bumping up my feathering a little bit, turning my chatter down a little bit. But once I'm done with that, I can close this footage out. And what I want to do is I'm going to close my effect. And now if I jump back here, now I've got my footage and my background's all clipped out. So now I'm back into my composition. I closed everything. Now I'm in my comp view and I can see that layer. So far, so good. That making sense? So what I want to do right now is I want to change up the background. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to actually make a duplicate of the background that we already have, but I'm going to make some kind of color adjustments to this so it looks a little bit different. So I'm going to drag it back, and now it just kind of looks like what we had before, right? It's him cut out just against him cut out, right? But because this is going to act as my background, I'm going to right click on this thing. I can rename this. I'm just going to call this thing BG for background. And now on my background, I want to make some changes to this thing. I want to kind of apply like a color effect to it, so it looks like he's kind of floating against like a darker background or something with some color to it. So with that layer selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my effects menu. I'm going to go to color correction. And I'm going to be looking for the hue saturation. I'm going to kind of change it. I'm going to make this blue. So here it gives me all my settings up here, and I'm going to turn on colorize. So I'm going to colorize this thing, and then I can adjust the hue, saturation, lightness. So if I click and drag, you can see it gives me all these different tones. I'm going to look for mine somewhere like in the blue range, like around 230 or so. For my saturation, I'm going to turn it up a little bit and kind of exaggerate it a little. And then if I want, I can adjust the lightness or darkness of it. I'm going to bring it down just maybe a little bit. So now, if I uncheck the visibility, here it is without him masked. This is just the raw footage. But remember, we've got him isolated as a separate layer. So now we're not seeing that. We just have him there. So far, so good. That making sense? All right. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to add in one more layer. So I'm going to right click inside my timeline area here. I'm going to do new text. I'm going to just give myself a new text layer. Type out to text. I'll highlight it. I'm just looking for something bold. This actually isn't terrible here in Arial Black. And again, for this stuff, like this is up to you guys. You can just kind of use whatever you want. Budgie. Yeah, I remember liking that one more. Ooh, maybe gold bold's my answer here. Okay, and then if you need to, you can bump up your size. I'm going to bump up tracking a little bit on this, just to get a little bit wider. Okay. Now, what I want to do now that I have this text here is I want to play around with stacking order. So this is actually something that if you guys wanted to go back, or if you haven't finished your kinetic type project, this might actually be a fun thing to throw in here, because this is just a separate layer. Now I've got it stacked. Now I can see this as its own object, and now it floats behind him, almost like a three-dimensional object, right? So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply a little bit of an effect to this thing. I got my text in here. Now what I want to do is I want to animate it, but also I think I need to knock down my opacity on this a little bit too. So let's do that. I'm going to hit my T button. I'm going to knock down the opacity, change that setting. Maybe like 40% or so. Just want to kind of fade it through. And again, it really helps with that like three-dimensional effect. And now because I'm on frame one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it look like this kind of slides in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my P button so I can see my position. And on frame one, I'm going to set this as my start point. And now on my final frame, I'm going to take this. I'm going to hold my shift key so it stays even across. And now, because it was already set with a stopwatch, now if I go ahead and play this thing back, I'll take a second to render this. Now with a pretty simple process, we've clipped something out entirely. And take a look at those edges. You can really see how clear and how clean that looks against the background with just a simple quick cutout, a little edge refining on the soft area, and it looks incredible. So awesome, awesome tool. Tons of uses. You guys have probably seen this on commercials. You've probably seen this all over the place. But you can see like this is a really, really quick effect. To give you some context, like in the past, before rotoscoping existed like this was literally a frame by frame clip out process that you'd have to essentially copy and paste vector points and realign to the edge. So yeah, this is really, really easy, really, really fast, and gives you a cool effect. So if you guys want to take this and reapply this back onto your kinetic type in any way, feel free. Again, I'd like you to drop in the folder by end of day today, but again, we're not going to look at them in class until next week. So if you do want to try this or apply any revisions to it, feel free. To be honest with you, like next time around when I teach this is going to be a requirement for that project, just because it's cool and it kind of works perfectly for it. So any questions on this jumping out, you guys? The only other thing I think I might do is turn on a motion blur on that. Just kind of smooth that off a little bit. And I like that. So when you're done, you can output this thing as an MP4 file. Remember, all you're doing is you're just doing export and add this thing to the media encoder queue. Media encoder will fire up. It'll output a .mp4 as long as you have all your settings. Once you set up your settings once, it'll remember it and it'll output it right out there. Also remember, as you're working, make sure you're saving this thing. I'm just going to do a quick save as, and I want to save this thing onto my desktop. Just remember that in case so that you don't run into any issues. Make sure you're saving as you go, especially if you're working on a slightly older machine or something that struggles with RAM. It's just an issue that I've run into. So that is what I got for you guys for this week. So if you have any questions on your kinetic type project, you want any feedback on it, really what I'm going to use the rest of the class today for is just open lab to get that stuff all wrapped up. Or if you guys want to just start working through this and then ask me questions as you go, that works too. I'll just be hanging out. Otherwise, I'll have the steps posted back up on the Blackboard shortly and then also up on YouTube. So good luck, have fun rotoscoping, and let me know if you have any questions.
According to the announcements, there was supposed to be a lesson 8.
Yeah, we're skipping that one for right now.
Oh, okay. Didn't know. Thank you. Have a good day.
No problem. You too.